Hey Blair, it's so great to see you.
Hey,
Thank you
Joanne.
for being willing to do this interview so more of our students can get to know you. It's really appreciated. So, okay, so we're going to start out with where you grew up, what high school you went to, and how did you make your path to Cabrillo?
Yeah, so I grew up in Santa Cruz. I was homeschooled through, I think, fourth grade and went to private school for a little while. I ended up at Mount Madonna School for a couple of years. Uh, I dropped out of high school about halfway through 10th grade. I just didn't really fit there and didn't feel motivated to learn. I first came to Cabrillo in 2001 at age 17, and I was studying music for a while. And then I left Cabrillo for a few years, and I was in Oakland, and I was doing some other things. And eventually, I got into working on bicycles, and I got into from there. There was this great place in Oakland. It might still be there. It's called the Crucible, and it's this industrial arts school. And I started
Oh,
volunteering there at this little bike kitchen that they had built into the whole warehouse space. And in exchange for my volunteer time, I got to take some welding classes, and I took TIG welding. And at this time, like, I was crazy about bicycles, and I wanted to build a bicycle trailer to like haul material around Oakland. And so I built one, and the first time I tested it and really rode with it carrying a heavy load, it broke. And I realized that I didn't really have any good process for design. I didn't really know how to build something or how to design something or how to think about it. I did not it did not break where I thought it would have broken. And I didn't know, like, well, how should I have designed it? Where should I put the wheels relative to the center of gravity? Those kinds of questions. And so it was that experience that got me to come back to say, okay, I want to go do mechanical engineering. And once I made that decision that this is what I want to do, I was a little bit older than a typical college student. I think I was probably 23 or 24 at that time. And I really just like set my sights on it, and I just went at it. And I came back to Cabrillo, naively thinking that I could take classes for a semester, then transfer to a 4 year university. That was my idea. The reality was 5 semesters, with every semester having an 8 a.m. math class going from calculus one all the way through differential equations. And it was great. And I'm super thankful for having done that. And, you know, having teachers like you and Joe and Carlos and Grappi, it was a great place to be. Um, and, I think I was also really lucky that my parents were still in Santa Cruz, and I was able to like just live with my dad and just focus on school full time. I think that's a large part of how I was able to be successful. And I acknowledge that not everyone has had that opportunity. And I'll say that being at Cabrillo, I felt was just like this superior life experience to being at a 4 year university, because you had so many people from so many different walks of life that were in different phases or different times of their life. Not everyone was just a 19-year-old kid that had gotten out of high school.
cool. And
Yeah.
were you involved in the bike co-op, Blair?
Yeah, so myself and Ryan Kaplan, who I'm
Yes.
actually still in touch with,
Yeah,
kind of started the bike club.
that's what I thought.
Ryan started it, and then he made me go and be the president for a while. So when we started the bike co-op, it was still it was like on that plaza. Like, I don't know how to describe it anymore. It's like below. If you take it from where I think it is now, you take an elevator down. And
Yeah.
so in this kind of funky place where it's like you couldn't actually ride a bike to the bike co-op because there are only stairs or elevators to get over there. Um, yeah, that was a fun time.
Yeah. And by the way, the Crucible is still around. And I
Yeah,
just toured it recently and I discovered that
cool.
bike area and I was pretty impressed.
Yeah.
I mean, I do glass work, so I love the
Oh,
Crucible.
nice.
But it
Yeah,
was interesting to see about the bike area
cool.
too. So that's neat that you had
Yeah,
that connection. Okay,
yeah.
so now you're at Cabrillo and you know you want to do mechanical engineering. So which universities were you thinking about? Where did you apply? Where did you go? What was your experience like there?
Um, so I have some fun stories, but ultimately Cal Poly San Luis Obispo it was always number one, and I was very lucky to get in there. I applied to a few other, mostly UC and CSU schools at the time, and I think I got into most of them, but Cal Poly was like far and away the top choice. And it may have had something to do with having ridden my bicycle there. I think a total of 4 times, riding from Santa Cruz down the coast through Big Sur on Highway 1 to get to Cal Poly. And one of those times was with Groppy, because she brought me on this crazy trip called Wheeled Migration, which was a bunch of these guys from Chico who were riding their bicycles from Chico all the way down to the sustainability conference that was being held at Cal Poly. And that was like this wild experience that I had. That was the seed of the bike co-op, because that was where I first ran into Ryan Kaplan.
Okay.
So on a later ride down, I was I think it, I was I rode my bike down there with some friends, and I think we camped in the woods at Sykes Hot Springs. And on the way out, I said, okay, well, I could turn right and I could go back to Santa Cruz for the rest of spring break, or I could turn left and go check out Cal Poly again because it's their open house. And I turned left, and left on the Pacific Coast Highway, heading south. And I went down there, and I ride into town, and there's like no hotel. Well, I couldn't afford a hotel. The hostel was full. And so I was like, well, this school this school isn't worth going to if I can't camp in the woods behind school. I definitely camped in the woods behind Cabrillo at least once. There used to be a great tree back there that you could climb and sleep up there.
Mm.
But so regardless, I'm riding onto campus. I have 4 panniers on my bicycle, and this guy rides up beside me, and he like asked where I'm going. I'm like, I was like, well, I was just gonna go camp in the woods. And he invited me to stay in his dorm room, and he kind of hosted me for the open house, and he gave me a class schedule so I could go and check out some engineering classes. And it was kind of that 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 spontaneous, like, okay, like this is it, like this is really what I should do, that got me to want to go down there.
Cool.
And I mean, besides my silly adventure stories, it really was a good fit for me. It's a very hands-on school, which I really liked, and it was a great value in terms of the amount of that I had to pay for tuition and room and board, for the education that I got, and the job opportunities that came out of that school were pretty superior to a lot of other things. So I'm very fortunate to have gone there.
That's great. And were you involved in clubs or anything at Cal Poly, or talk about your senior project or some internships
Yeah.
you had?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna jump like way ahead in your
Sure.
questions here, and talk a little bit about that, because
Yeah.
I got a little bit involved in the Human Powered Vehicle Club, and that's the club that builds a bicycle, and it's typically a recumbent bicycle with a carbon fiber composite shell, and they race it
Mm.
at it's some road. I think it's in Nevada or Utah that's like super long and super flat, and so they try to see how fast they can go. I got a little bit involved in that team, but I didn't do like a full cycle and compete with them. Um, Partly because I was just so busy with classes, and partly because it felt very hard for me to make a real good social connection with the team, because at this point I'm 26 and they're
Mm.
20, which at that age is a very different time in life. But so I will, jump straight to the advice for people that are taking your classes now, which is that, one, get into those clubs that build something, and go do something. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. Like, one, it's something that will make you stand out on your resume. And you're going to get a lot more of that long-term experience from that than you are from doing your class projects. And I guess a senior project is a little bit of of an exception, because a senior project can go for a year. But one of these clubs, if you get in, early, right? If you're at a 4-year university, you could be doing that for 4 years and start out just doing whatever and end up leading the club. And it's a lot more challenging if you're a transfer student because at best you have 3 years to do that work. So that would be one piece of advice is like get into one of those clubs as soon as you can and and go for it.
Yeah.
And
Blair, hang on a
yeah,
second. The volume is going crazy, so I wanna, if
yeah.
somebody's watching the video, I want to make sure. I'm not quite sure why this is happening, but let me just shut it off for a minute and see. Yeah, it's weird. Okay.
All right. Can't hear me?
Okay, now it's good. Yeah,
Okay.
it's all right now.
All right. Okay. Yeah, and I actually managed to get through school without having any internships, which is not really a good thing. Um, I was offered an internship at one time working with one of my professors from Cal Poly, and I didn't take it because I was holding out for something else, and I regret that.
Mm,
Partly because I really like the teacher. I didn't like the subject matter of the internship as much as I liked this other thing that I thought I could get, which didn't pan out.
mm,
Um, so again, like that's something that'll really set you apart is getting that real world experience. Um,
yeah.
you learn in engineering school, you learn how to talk about engineering and you learn how to talk about technical subjects because you gain that background, but you don't really learn how to do anything because any job that you take, the content, the technical content is going to be way too specific. It's going to be way too in depth to be taught at Cabrillo or a 4-year university or what have you. Like you just have to get in there and do something and
Mm,
get experience doing actual
yeah.
work because actual work is way different from school work.
Yeah. That's great. So you talked about your time at Cal Poly and at the same time
Yeah,
gave two suggestions to
yeah,
students, right? Get involved. And maybe it would be good to take the internship. And if something else comes
hmm,
along, then you have to kind of decide and figure out how you want to
yeah,
approach. But yeah,
yeah,
those are great feedback. Okay, so now
yeah.
you're nearing graduation at Cal Poly. And where did you decide to work? And what kind of things were you working on? What's a favorite project you worked on?
Yeah. So coming out of Cal Poly, I managed to get myself a job at JPL, so NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which at the time I think was probably the best way for me to really get trained as a young engineer. And I started there working in the mechanical integration group. And what that group does is they build ground support equipment for spacecraft and scientific instruments. And then they also do the job of leading those operations on the floor. So we would talk to our customers and say, hey, what is this thing that you're trying to build? How do you think it's going to go together? And you create a storyboard board for that. And out of that storyboard comes the requirements for the equipment that they need. And then you build them that equipment, and then you go and actually help them build their thing. You write the assembly procedures, leading the crane operations, um, doing the integration, doing transportation work. It was all super cool, all pretty fun. I think my favorite project I worked on was this project called LDSD, Low Density Supersonic Decelerator. And the purpose of the project was to test parachutes that would be used at Mars. And the thing about Mars is the atmosphere there is about 1% as dense as the atmosphere on Earth. And to test a supersonic parachute, you have to actually get going supersonic for it to matter because you think about a hard statics problem you've done. Well, okay, now everything is a soft good, and you have like compressible flow and like it's you have to test it. Um, and of course, they do some wind tunnel test at Ames. There's a big wind tunnel up there where they do parachute tests. But the way to get to a Mars entry condition on Earth is you get an entry vehicle that's shaped like a Mars entry vehicle, so a flying saucer, and you tie it to a helium balloon, and you let the helium balloon go, and it goes up to about I think 130,000 feet or so, and then you drop off the balloon and you light a rocket motor. And the rocket motor gets you to Mach 4, and then you can test your parachute.
Wow.
Um, so we did this in so I got to be on the second of two launch campaigns, which meant that I helped to build the second test vehicle and then I helped to go launch it. Unfortunately, we had to launch it out of Kauai, Hawaii, and unfortunately, I had to stay there on the island for 2 months. So that was a bummer. Um, and so I can send you a digital version of this. Well, actually, I probably shouldn't send a digital version because it
Yeah.
was taking out a
Okay.
military base, but I'll show
Yeah, yeah,
you.
yeah.
So this is me, and then next
Oh,
to me
cool.
is a Star 48. So a Star 48 is a 3,000-pound solid rocket engine
Okay.
that is typically used to get a satellite from low Earth orbit to geostationary orbit. But in this case, that was our rocket motor for this flying saucer. And so I got to be the one to lead the crane operation to install the
Wow.
rocket motor on the flying saucer.
How
Um,
neat.
and very few people can say that.
Yeah, no, that's great, Blair. It sounds
Yeah,
very exciting.
yeah. So I did that. I worked on a mission called SWAT. That was a Earth orbiting mission that measured the sea surface height and height of lakes and rivers, and has helped us to understand the water cycle on Earth. I
Okay.
got to work on the Mars sample return mission for about 2.5 years. I was the lead for something called the orbiting sample. Sorry, I have more props.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. So you're a mechanical engineer and you got to work in the aerospace industry.
Yep. Yeah. So this is a sample tube. This is just a 3D printed aluminum version of one of the sample tubes. There are 43 of these on Mars. The majority of them now have a hermetically sealed rock core inside. And the Mars sample return mission is about bringing those samples back. Unfortunately, it has run into a lot of political issues, and it's unclear if it's ever going to go forward or succeed. Um, but it was pretty fun to work on, and so I got to do that, and I was a lead for something called the orbiting sample, which was this basketball-sized titanium container that was going to load 30 of these samples in and bring them home essentially. And it was
Wow.
this totally
Interesting.
passive device,
Okay.
very very challenging, lots of interfaces. Um, and so I think I found on that role that I was getting drawn in the direction of doing management and system engineering, and I really
Mm,
don't like that, and I
yeah.
really have wanted to stay technical. And at the same time, I caught this bug to just do software all the time, and now that's all I've really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so the last year that I was at JPL, I got to do some operations work for the Mars 2020 rover, and I wrote some software that analyzed their downlink data, and that was a super fun time.
Wow.
Um, and during the time between getting laid off in February of last year and finally finding work in like November, I was pursuing the software track really hard, and the
Yeah.
the job market for it is crap right now, and I wasn't able to land anything. And so where I came to is I said, okay, well, I got to eat, and I'm good at doing CAD modeling, so I just like started searching for remote designer jobs
Yeah, yeah.
essentially, and that's what I'm doing now. um, which has its ups and downs, right? Because I think I'm running at like 50% duty cycle right now in terms of like what they're having me do versus what I'm capable of. The
Okay.
company I'm working for, Commonwealth Fusion Systems, is quickly seeing that I can do a lot more than they hired me for, and they're taking
Okay.
advantage of that.
Great.
But it's a contract role, and
Right.
so it's not something that I can really like deeply invest myself in
All right.
unless I'm brought on full time, and we'll see if
Yeah.
that transpires or not.
You, Blair, you use the term duty something, and I'm
Duty
not familiar.
cycle.
Could you duty cycle?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the correct term, but
Okay.
essentially what I mean is that they're I'm not operating at my full like
Ah,
intellectual or
I got it. Okay.
capacity, right? Like the job that I applied for and that I was hired for, I am vastly overqualified for.
Gotcha.
But I got in, and I'm working remotely, and I build pillow forts with my daughter on my lunch break. So like who's won? I think I did.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And then it
Yeah.
sounds like the company is seeing your potential and
Yeah.
then you could see where that goes. That's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it's fun to hear about the different projects that you've been working on. That's really
Yeah.
great. Okay, so how about how has your engineering degree impacted your quality of life? What
Um,
opportunities have you experienced that you wouldn't have experienced had you not had the engineering degree?
well, I mean, the way that I look at it, Joanne, is that I have figured out that I really work to live. I don't live to work. And that's not true of every engineer, but I've made it true of myself. And I've set it up. I was like, look, like I have this certain life that I want to live. I want to live in this place, and I want these to be my values. And I've built my life around that. And the engineering has allowed me to do that because I have skills that are thankfully still marketable. And I've taken advantage of that. And I think when you're young, it's really easy to think this job that I do is like, it's like the ultimate purpose, or I'm doing something to help humanity, yada yada yada, and that can be true. But you really have to temper that, I think.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, for me and where I am in my life, that forget how old I am now. I'm 40. Um, is like the job is a job,
Right.
and it's not who I am. It's not my identity. That's
Yeah.
that's what it's come to.
Yeah. And in an engineering degree, you're getting all these skills that are highly
Yeah,
marketable and
yeah,
open so many doors that you could do
yeah,
whatever you want. You could do engineering, you could not do engineering, you could do something else,
yeah,
but you have these skills of logical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving that can apply to anywhere.
yeah,
So I hear from alumni who are doing engineering or not, and they just say that with this engineering degree, I could get the quality of life I want, which means make a certain amount of money, be able to have a
yeah,
house, go on vacation, do whatever.
yeah,
So, okay. And then the next question is what suggestions do you have for engineering students? But you already said that. So let me
yeah.
think. Um, I have some students who watch these videos are seniors in high school. And
Hmm.
they're trying to decide, should I go straight to a four-year school? Should I go to a community college first? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I mean,
Yeah.
certainly you were in a different different situation than an 18-year-old, but
Right. Yes. But and my educational history, again, as I said at the beginning, is pretty atypical, having dropped out of high school, etc. So what I'd say about a four-year university is that, like, if you're really sure what you want to do and you're really motivated and that's the only thing you want to do and you want to like put your nose to the grindstone and just like get that done, you'll probably be really successful going to a four-year university. If you're not sure, or you're just like not in a place in your life where you're like ready to really get down to business and really work on shit, like go do something else, go travel for a year, or like really, I'm so happy that I worked in coffee shops for a couple of years and like worked for a landscaper and did construction jobs. Especially the food service, everyone should work in food service. You learn so much about the world that way. um, and I remember being in my teens and thinking that, oh my gosh, like I have to get this done. I have to get through school and get a job as soon as possible. And no, forget it. Like just take your time. You're not really in that much of a hurry. Life is long, and I think I have had a much happier life, largely based on the fact that I took a very slow route to get to where I was.
mm,
Um, I, I'm not saying that you should have 169 units when you graduate Cabrillo, and I'm not saying you should be 29 when you graduate from a four-year university, but you can dial those back a bit.
yeah. Okay, Blair.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to stop the recording unless you think that there something else you'd like to add.
No, I don't think so. It's
Okay.
it's really been great catching up with you.
Okay. Well, hang on a second
Yeah.
for me.